9 experienced hikers set out into the Soviet wilderness. Their tent was found cut open from the inside. They had run into minus 30-degree temperatures in their socks in the middle of the night. And what was done to their bodies has never been explained. Welcome to Drawn to Crime, where real mysteries unfold through animation. In this episode, we cover the Dyatlov Pass incident, the case that has baffled investigators, scientists, and governments for over 60 years, and the one that the Soviet Union tried very hard to make sure you never heard about. I want you to imagine something. You're an experienced hiker. You've done this before. Winter expeditions, extreme weather, dangerous terrain. You know what you're doing. You're inside your tent on the side of a mountain. It's minus 30 degrees outside. The wind is tearing across the slope. Your sleeping bag, your boots, your gear, everything you need to survive is right there with you. And something makes you take a knife and cut your way out of that tent from the inside. And run. Not grab your boots, not take your coat, not wake your companions calmly. Run. Into the dark, into the cold, in your socks. All 9 of you. Whatever was out there on that mountain that night, it was more terrifying than minus 30 degrees. And to this day, nobody knows what it was. It was January 1959. A group of 10 hikers set out from the city of Sverdlovsk in the Soviet Union, headed for Otorten, a mountain in the northern Ural range whose name, in the local Mansi language, translates roughly to, "Don't go there." They were led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student and experienced expedition leader at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. His team were all students and graduates, all highly experienced, all volunteers who had trained for exactly this kind of extreme winter trek. One member turned back early due to illness, leaving 9 on the mountain, 7 men and 2 women. They were fit, prepared, equipped. This was not a group that made careless decisions. They were expected back by the 12th of February. When they didn't return, nobody was immediately alarmed. Experienced hikers often run a few days behind schedule in extreme conditions. But by the end of February, search parties were sent out. What they found changed everything. Searchers found the abandoned tent on the 26th of February. It was partially collapsed under snow, and the entrance was sealed. But the tent wall had been cut open from the inside. Multiple cuts, deliberate ones. All of the group's belongings were still inside. Food, boots, warm clothing, cameras, everything. And leading away from the tent, down the slope toward the tree line below, footprints. 9 sets of them. Some barefoot, some in socks, some in a single boot. They followed the footprints down the slope. About 1.5 miles from the tent, at the edge of the tree line, they found the remains of a small fire. And beside it, the first 2 bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, both in their underwear, barefoot. Branches torn from the tree above them. They had been trying to climb it, investigators believed, to see something in the distance. Both had died of hypothermia. Between the fire and the tent, 3 more bodies were found. Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. Their positions suggested they had been trying to crawl back to the tent, back toward their gear. They didn't make it. That was 5. The remaining 4 were not found until May, when the snow finally melted enough to reveal them, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine not far from the tree line. And what was found with those 4 bodies is what turned this from a tragic accident into something nobody has been able to explain since. The 4 bodies found in the ravine in May told a completely different story from the 5 found earlier. Lyudmila Dubanina was missing her tongue, her eyes, her lips. Soft tissue from her face had been removed with surgical precision, though no tool marks were found on the bone beneath. Semyon Zolotarev and Dubanina both had massive internal injuries, broken ribs, crushed chest cavities. The kind of force required to cause that damage, a forensic expert testified, was comparable to a car crash or a powerful blast wave. but their skin was unbroken. No external wounds, no bruising consistent with a physical assault. Whatever caused those internal injuries hit them from the outside without touching them. Several of the bodies had an unusual orange-brown tan on their skin. Investigators initially assumed it was decomposition, but then the clothing was tested. Radiation. Multiple items of clothing from several of the hikers tested positive for radioactive contamination at levels significantly above background. No explanation was ever officially provided for where it came from. And one more detail that nobody has ever been able to account for. Witnesses in the region and military personnel stationed nearby reported seeing glowing orange spheres moving through the sky above the Ural Mountains on the night the hikers died. Multiple witnesses, independent of each other. Glowing spheres. The Soviet investigation into the Dyatlov Pass incident lasted only a matter of months before being abruptly closed. The conclusion, and I want you to sit with this, was that the hikers had died as a result of, quote, a compelling natural force. That was it. No further explanation, no specification of what that force was. The case files were classified and locked away. They remained inaccessible to the public for decades, only becoming available after the fall of the Soviet Union. Researchers who gained access to the files found that key documents were missing. Photographs from the scene that investigators had referenced in their notes simply weren't there. In 2019, Russia officially reopened the investigation. After 2 years of work, they announced a new conclusion. An avalanche, they said, had caused the hikers to flee the tent, leading to the deaths by hypothermia and injury. The problem is that the slope where the tent was pitched was considered too shallow and too stable for an avalanche of that magnitude. And the physical evidence, the nature of the injuries, the radiation, the missing soft tissue, was not addressed by the avalanche theory at all. Most researchers who have studied the case consider it deeply unsatisfying. And the Russian government's decision to reopen and reclose the case so quickly, with so many questions left unanswered, has only deepened the suspicion that something is still being hidden.
The theories surrounding Dyatlov Pass are some of the most varied and passionate in the entire true crime and mystery space. And honestly, I understand why. The avalanche theory is the most scientifically mainstream. The idea is that a small, unexpected snow slab broke loose and struck the tent, causing the hikers to flee in panic and leading to the sequence of deaths from hypothermia and injury. Proponents point to recent biomechanical studies, suggesting the rib injuries could be consistent with being crushed by snow rather than a blast. But it doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain the missing soft tissue, and it doesn't explain the orange spheres. The infrasound theory suggests that wind moving across the mountain at a specific frequency could have created a subsonic tone, below the range of human hearing, that triggers a panic response in the human body. Disorientation, overwhelming irrational fear. Enough to make 9 experienced hikers run into the dark without their boots. Then there's the military theory. The glowing spheres were real. Multiple witnesses confirmed them. Some researchers believe the Soviet military was conducting secret weapons testing in the area that night, and that the hikers were killed either by a shockwave from an experimental device or because they witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. It would explain the radiation. It would explain the internal injuries with no external trauma. It would explain why the Soviet Union closed the investigation so fast and classified the files. And it would explain why certain documents were missing from those files when researchers finally got access to them. And then there's the theory that the local Mansi people, who considered that mountain sacred and had warned outsiders away from it for generations, knew something about what happened there that nobody in the Soviet government ever thought to take seriously. The mountain is called Don't Go There for a reason. The Dyatlov Pass is still there. Hikers still make the journey. There is now a monument at the site, a simple marker for 9 young people who set out on an adventure and never came home. Igor Dyatlov was 23 years old. The youngest member of the group was 21. They were students, friends, people who loved the mountains and trusted each other completely. Whatever happened on that slope in the early hours of the 2nd of February, 1959, it happened fast. And it was terrifying enough to override every survival instinct 9 experienced hikers had. The Soviet Union called it a compelling natural force and locked the files away. Over 60 years later, we're still standing outside that tent trying to figure out what that means. So I want to know what you think. Avalanche? Military cover-up? Something the Soviet government saw in those files and decided the world wasn't ready to know? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this one kept you up, you need to hear about 8 people murdered in their sleep in a small Iowa town, where the killer covered every mirror in the house and then sat in the dark and waited for morning. That story is right here. Go watch it next.